Ladies and gentlemen, Hans Niemann has done it yet again. Recently, there was a chess event contested in Dallas, Texas, between Hans Niemann and Vidit Gujarati, superstar grandmaster from India and one of the candidates from the recently completed candidates tournament. This was a blitz match worth $50,000. Two guys met in a small athletic stadium, played chess for 4 hours. One got 30 grand and the other got 20 grand. First of all, I'm a little annoyed I wasn't invited to play this match because even if I got obliterated, I would have made $20,000. In this video, I'm going to break down some of the greatest games from the back and forth, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this event. So first of all, I have no idea where this event got its money from, but it seems like the event is called the Universal Chess Tour, all right? And before I even get into the event and the specifics, more generally, Hans Niemann has talked about the fact that despite being a 2,700 level player, he is not getting invited to tournaments much at all anymore, even tournaments that he has won in the past, which is kind of unheard of in the chess world. Like, chess is not like, it's not like tennis. You don't have open events. You can't just show up and play and then, you know, knock people out, not physically like in tennis the way they do. You kind of have to get invited, and he's not getting many invitations. And that's not a good thing. Being blacklisted from these tournaments, whether it's official or unofficial, that's not a good thing at all. So Hans is kind of taking matters into his own hands and playing high-stakes events with sponsors, and it seems to be working in his favor. Now, so first things first, okay? This event is something called the Universal Chess Tour. It doesn't really exist. It's born. They have a tournament going on right now in Texas, and it's got $150,000 guaranteed, and I have no idea who's providing this money. Like, absolutely, it doesn't, I don't know, and I haven't asked. And the match that Hans was going to take part in was the Super GM match. It's somewhere here, or maybe not. But Hans played Super Grandmaster match against Vidit Gujarati. Now, the reason I say this event was kind of weird and random, and listen, I understand, I just participated in the Clash of Claims, okay? That was by far the weirdest event anybody's ever been a part of. It's because the stream looked like this half the time. Also, the people commentating the event were basically like a group of high schoolers that were like friends. It was very strange. But the chess spoke for itself. Chess-based India was on site, and it was played in this pretty big venue, and the fans were lining up and getting a chance to, you know, meet and greet the players. Here's a photo of people watching the event. And like, it's a pretty, you know, it's like a pretty big stadium. Like, it's a pretty big deal. See Hans there in the foreground. This is a very talented international master over here, Josiah Stearman. I think might be friends with Hans. I don't know what his direct involvement is with the event. And some fans, right? So the reason why this event was strange is, like I said, the commentary was broken half the time, but on site, there was a room full of players and people, and it was kind of interesting, and I'm going to show you some games. So Hans Niemann also said in a recent YouTube video that he did an interview for Lviv Chess, he said he's got more of these planned. In fact, he said he's going to play Anish Giri in a one-on-one match with a sponsor in the Netherlands. He said he's going to Paris to play Etienne Bacrot in a match. Hans, come to New York, play me in a match. I'll lose every game. Just give me 25 grand. I'll do, you know what I mean? I mean, if the prize fund is that high for the loser, I'll be the richest loser of all time. So my friends, let me take you through some of these games. I don't know why this game is on move 11 already, but let's go back to the beginning. So the format of this match was also extremely weird. I feel like they showed up to Texas and they just decided like a format there. Vidit flew in and whatnot. The format was they play a set of games at 4 minutes and 2 second bonus. Then they play a set of games at 3 minutes and 2 second bonus. And then they play a game at 2 seconds and 2 minutes and 2 second bonus. And they do that. They were playing until 2 in the morning. This is what I mean by this event was really strange. Like 9 p.m. local time until 2 a.m. is when they played. They couldn't have played like 5 to 10? Like, I don't... Anyway, here we go. Hans opened the match with e4. This is 4 minutes and 2 second bonus time. There are no timestamps because the game broadcast was broken the whole time. I'm telling you, Weird event, but very, very exciting chess. The players are not to blame for the, strange happenings of the event. Now, Vidit got off to a very quick start. He had good pressure on Hans's position, and I think I started paying attention maybe somewhere here in the middle game, where Vidit just had a comfortable position, but it was not really obvious to me why he was better. The computer was claiming he was better, and Vidit started creating a kingside attack onto Hans. He obviously got all of his pieces to really, really nice squares. Like, his bishop is camped on the light squares, but then Vidit got himself in trouble, and he got into time trouble, which you can't see because there's no timestamps because, like I said, game relay is a bit goofy. But one thing Hans did in this match was he fought, man. Like, he was really good at keeping the tension, and when it was time to release the tension, my man just bulldozed forward with his f-pawn, bishop f4, bishop e5, rook f4, preparing the move f6, and there it is. And you go back like 10 moves, dude's pawn was on f3 playing a defensive role. Within like 15 moves, 10, 15 moves, it's on f6. And he is just shredding through. And Vidit had a nice position for like 30 moves in this game, but was not able to really generate a whole lot. Hans played f7, rook f5, and just absolute domination here. Rook h5 is checkmate if the queen moves somewhere. So Vidit has to play this, give up the rook, and he's just a rook down. And Hans has another piece on the way, knight to f5. And in this position, Vidit resigned because of the passed pawn. Now, Hans got off to a really good start. I was like, wow, that was a crazy game. But they traded blows early, all right, in the 4-minute and 2-second bonus, which is also a strange time control. I'm not trying to belittle this match, but it was a weird match. And I know I would know a thing or two about weird matches. All right, I just came back from Spain, not my tournament, but Kramnik Jose Martinez was weird in its own way. But this was a fascinating thing to watch. C3 A6, bishop E7, bishop B3, and both guys were content early on playing E4, E5, and playing Italians. You will remember that the previous game was also in Italian. So both guys have the Italian in their opening repertoire. Vidit playing a sideline, Hans playing a sideline, H6. And the idea of H6 is that ultimately you play G6, and then ultimately you put the bishop behind the pawn. It's a very, very interesting and unique way to play the position. But early on, it was Vidit who was understanding how to play it a little bit better. And I think just from the maneuvering and this f4 move, Vidit got a very powerful kind of attack, launching back at Hans. Hans took, and then played this move c5. I don't know if he I don't think Hans blundered a pawn. He's obviously very strong. Maybe he just didn't like where the position was headed. Admittedly, the computer here wants black to play knight d5, which makes sense because you cannot take. But then white can play bishop h6, which is kind of an absurd move. The idea is simply that after bishop h6, you have knight h5. And if you take that knight as well, now this works. And then you go here. Something tells me this wouldn't have happened, but knight d5 that move on its own makes sense. But maybe Hans just saw, like, I don't know, not much progress can be made, and the f-file is pretty strong for white. So he went c5, and Vidit just took his pawn. And now Hans has to create counterplay, but Vidit locks the center. Knight takes d4 is not possible. You do counterattack the queen, but now you have two hanging knights. Can't do anything about that. So knight d5. And Vidit got a very powerful attack. All his pieces swarm forward. And, I mean, he's just completely winning. Like, it's not close. But one thing that Hans did in this match is he fought, and he fought, and he fought, and, like, that's mate, and the queen is hanging? So here, Vidit kind of went into a panic. He played this move, knight e4. He has to give up his queen. But he has a rook and a piece and, like, pawns for it, and his position is completely winning. But Hans never stopped. I mean, he was so good at creating counterplay from the most obscure spots on the board that by the time this game progressed into the 40th move, white is hardly better. White is hardly better, but Vidit found a second wind. Hans played knight c6, and yeah, I mean, white's position just a little bit too dominant. Just a little bit too dominant. Everything is protected. Everything important is protected. It's just a matter of time until the next wave comes. King f2 playing some defense, bishop d5. And unfortunately, for Hans Niemann and Hans Niemann fans, the e-pawn is simply too strong. And Vidit won the second game. Very nice move, rook e6 in between move, forcing the king to walk into a check. And here, the resignation as bishop to f8 is made. So this was actually a very fascinating match. Like, both guys were clobbering each other. And if you remember the photo that I showed you of the playing venue, what they would do is that they would get up and switch sides. So they would get up, they would go to the other person's chair. Very bare bones. It's like what's called a no frills restaurant, you know? I don't think the event was rated either. And I have no idea if there was any sort of arbiter, I mean, this was a recreational blitz match for 50 grand. Dude, I'm telling you, they gotta invite me to one of these, okay? You lose every game, you make $20,000. Guys, you could have participated, okay? Now, early on, it was very, very back and forth. One thing I love about the way Hans plays chess is that he mixes up different openings. I cannot tell you how annoyed and bored I get as a spectator, and I'm a commentator, I'm a YouTuber. I'm supposed to always be able to make the game exciting for you guys, but I get so bored when they play the same openings over and over. I mean, I hate it. I'm like, you guys are 2,700. You know every opening. Play a different opening. And Hans likes to play different openings. He's not worried, right? Like, he's not worried like, well, I'm not going to be better here. No, he plays this, this line of the English. Bishop g5, black plays d5. We have this position. And this has been seen many, many times before, where white gives up the dark squared bishop and kind of spends the game trying to pry apart black's defenses. Personally, I find these positions much easier to play with white because I feel like black's pawn structure is really not that good. I mean, the position is always equal, but it just somehow feels like black is a move away from losing everything. Knight b5 attacks the queen. Now rook c1, and Hans is going to start moving over here on the c file. Knight to f4 and stuff like that. Bishop a5, knight f4, there it is. Knight takes, pawn takes. You don't have to take because naturally you're bolstering your opponent's position, but other moves here are very strange. Like, the best move for white is maybe even to just sack the rook, which, I don't know, not that easy to do. Bishop h3, this strikes me as much more natural. Engine hates it, of course. Rook e8, and now this very nice move, queen a3, which Hans found. And after queen a3, you damage and isolate your own pawns. You double your a-pawns, you isolate your a-pawns, but the point is, now you pressure on these two files. This is actually a genius positional concept. The bishop now is absolutely dominant on h3. Probably the best that black can get is to play g5. I'm actually shocked Vidit did not do this. Maybe he didn't like knight to d6, but after rook e7, there is g4 on the way. Now, admittedly, Vidit he's really not out of it. And, white's bishop will just reroute, but you gotta, I would have thought you have to get this bishop off of h3. All right, but he plays rook e7, and Hans just takes on a7. Now, some of you may be wondering, Levy, what about knight a7 in this position? Yes. But the advantage is that now you shove the bishop backwards, and you can actually create counterplay. The knight needs time to get out, right? Play h4. I guess knight d6 is really strong if you do it in this move order, so maybe play rook e7 first. Now, if knight d6, you always have bishop c7 ideas, rook d7 ideas. Bishop c7 is, there's just this, so please half disregard the stuff that I'm saying. But yeah, Hans just takes, plays knight c8, plays knight d6, and Vidit just can't defend his position in time. Look at that. This bishop was an absolute god. And Hans just played a positional masterclass. He won both pawns. Again, 10 moves ago, those pawns were still on the board. He won both pawns. Now his a-pawn, look at this, just becomes a hero. Wins the rook. Rook c5, rook c7 is on the way. You're going to trade. Vidit played on a little bit, but it's just not there. He loses the knight. And I think he played out the game a little bit. Yeah, here he resigned. I mean, that was an excellent game. I mean, Hans got this very solid standard type of English position. And then he just, like, this concept of queen a3 and ba, deep stuff. Really nice. So Hans won the first segment. He won the 4-minute, 2-second bonus segment with the score of 4-3. It was very close. Now, they started the next segment, right? And Vidit, now this is 3-minute, 2-second bonus. We go back to an Italian, right? So we reset. So Hans is leading the sets 1-0, like in tennis. And we have, you know, standard, typical Italian stuff. This game was a little bit weird. Hans crawled forward, traded the dark squared bishop. It was a bit of a strange game. Kind of felt like nobody really was ready to get started. A lot of maneuvering. But as always, Hans is kind of the one instigating. He's always, like, trying to pick a fight. Not just in his chess, by the way. I mean, he's probably going to react to this video at some point and make some clip of it. So I'm just going to say, like, what's up, Hans? Sick match. And, yeah, good luck against the niche. And thanks for your feedback on the road to GM. Okay, I think I said everything I wanted to say. Pawn takes f5. d5. I'm always, like, a little scared going on social media. I never know, like, what new daily dose of memes are going to get sold, provided from the commentary of one Hans Niemann. Now, here, though, however, he instigated a little too quickly. He had to take with the pawn first. Maybe he didn't like something here. Maybe he didn't like knight h2, and the bishop is a bit stuck. Maybe I don't know what he didn't like. But he went d5 right away, and this is a very nice Zwischenzug. f6 check. Whatever black takes with, he loses the coordination. If you take with the rook, there's knight e5. You take with the queen, there's knight e5. You take with the king, I feel like you should probably be beaten. You take with the king? I mean, there's knight e5, d e5, whatever. Hans tries to avoid the pawn. Knight e5 still. And Vidit crashes through the center of the board. He's up 2 pawns. And this is a very nice move, f4. Maybe he can also play queen f4 here. But f4, blocking access to f3. And Vidit, in the first game of the 3+2, got an absolutely dominating position. Queen to f4. And Hans just resigned here. I think he was also about to lose on time. But, I mean, he's 2 pawns down, rook f1. The best way to continue would have been here. Now, if rook f1, you actually hang a rook. So you got to be a little bit careful. But Hans lost game 1. And Vidit was right back at it. All right, Vidit stormed back in the 3+2. This game was one of the most insane games of the match. This was probably my favorite game. It was a Queen's Indian. Again, Hans playing different openings. Vidit too. Vidit playing d4, playing e4. One thing I really like and appreciate about these guys. Not worried about, you know, different openings. White got absolutely nothing from the opening here. Black had a fantastic Queen's Indian defense. Actually, in my Dutch course on Chessly, a lot of positions look like this as well. Black ultimately puts a knight on e4 and even attacks with like this. And that's actually exactly what Hans did. He plugged the e4 square, and then he started attacking with f4 and g5. Now, sometimes in these positions, Black gets this attack going, right? Like this, which is what he did in this game. And it looks really scary. It looks really dangerous for White. It's actually not dangerous at all. Like, it's a complete illusion. The engine thinks Black's position is almost on the verge of complete collapse because it's really good at not getting scared. But humans are humans, and humans get scared. Take, g4. Look at this. f3 is on the... None of it matters. Great move from Vidit. Excellent move. Rook d7, centralizing. Hans brings another pawn. I mean, it's all he's got, right? He just has the pawns in front of his king. But it's actually a lot easier to play with White. King h1, king h8. Now Vidit takes. He starts poking holes in the attack. And he wins himself a pawn. And he's basically saying, you have nothing. Knight to h3, f3. It's still balanced according to the engine, but again, Black is now losing material and desperately in need of an attack. Rook to g7 played by Hans. He loses another pawn. He's now 2 pawns down. Again, the Black position is a little bit on life support. And Hans blunders. He plays rook to g6. Obviously trying to defend his pawn. Who could blame him? Now White has to play f4, and that seals everything shut. It's not easy to play a move like this because it's absolutely not clear what the idea is. Let's say, you know, h4 gets played. Yeah, you just go f5. So the point is to rip open the position, rook f6, try to win the queen. And if Black plays g3 here, you take, and there's actually nothing. There's nothing. You're a move away from getting absolutely slaughtered, and it's actually Black who loses. It's very difficult to play a position like this because naturally you just think you're blundering something, right? Which is why Vidit didn't do that. He went queen e5. He tried to trade the queens and go to an endgame, and now there's like mate threats all over the place, and he goes fg. He had to keep it shut, but g3 is very scary. But you actually just take, and there's nothing. There's no threat. Knight to e4, there's no threat. Look at that, you're almost made it, but you don't win the game with an almost. Right? Knight's not even the best move necessarily, but knight f6, whatever. But Vidit takes on g4, and suddenly, this is made in 2. This is also made. Now, this is a very different story, by the way. Now, this is a very different story. Vidit is now 3 pawns up. Hans gets the piece back, and right here during the commentary, I was on the ChessBase India channel around here, and I actually predicted that Black was going to win this game. Why? Because even though White is up a million pawns, 3, this pawn will be the hero. I actually predicted Hans would get to the A pawn, and the A pawn of his own would be too powerful. Not to mention the fact that mate is coming all the time if the king moves. So Vidit at this point is up 4 pawns, but on the verge of a checkmate. Plays here, and now he probably had to get moving, and he's almost mated. King g1 now would have been the hero move. He didn't find it. He loses the pawn, and it's really bad. His pawns are too slow. And Hans Niemann trades the rook, stops the pawn, and that's it. He just wins the game. There is no way for White to stop anything, and Vidit here either ran out of time or resigned because he actually he can't move. A4, B7, he doesn't even have to take, he could play A3. Like the pawn, you know, you just lose the rook, and then the pawn promotes. Crazy game. Absolutely nuts. Hans was down 3 pawns. 3, but the attack was just strong enough. Vidit wasn't cold-blooded. And Hans struck back. This was a crazy game, but the second set did belong to Vidit. C4, C6, like I said, guys are mixing up their openings, playing all sorts of different lines. You know, again, love this, respect this about the players. But then something absolutely nuts happened to end the third set. So Hans played this way, and then if I ask you to play a move here in 2 seconds with White, 2 seconds, what do you play? Don't even think. Castle. Absolutely, I agree with you. You know, some of you would probably, you know, go here, but castle, right? Now, the reason, of course, castle is by far most natural move. The reason why Hans didn't do that is because he was worried about e5. And in general, in these positions, if Black can successfully get e5 on the board, and, you know, you have to trade all the pieces like this, you know, well, Black is fine. In fact, Black might be better in this particular version of it, so maybe you have to trade the queens, and this is just equal. So Hans saw that, and he decided, okay, I'm not going to let Vidit play e5. So if he takes me, it's a fork. There is bishop b4 check. And on bishop b4 check, for reasons I can't quite explain, Hans decided not to block the check, but play king f1. Now, again, he's probably playing well in the match. He's full of confidence. He's like, I'm going to get a little bit creative in this game. I'm probably just going to put my king on g2. Also, I'm probably threatening, you know, this is like super, super silly, but I'm like threatening maybe to, you know, lock away the bishop and play a3. Not exactly, but, you know, you get the point. So he plays king f1. Vidit plays knight e4. And Hans doesn't like the knight here. So rather than getting rid of it, not like knight d2 right away, but you can play a3 followed by knight d2, he plays f3. He straight up loses in 10 moves. 11, I suppose. This is the 11th move. Because now, this is mate. And queen h4 doesn't just threaten queen f2 mate, it threatens queen e1 mate. There's 2 mates when the queen gets there. And Vidit takes here first. It's the best move. Because actually, if the queen had gone out, there would have been this. Stopping both mates. Then Black goes here, and the game actually goes on. It's not completely over. But if you take on e5 first, now the game is over. d5, queen h4. Hans lost in 12 moves. After completely dominating the first set, and ultimately Vidit was the one that won the second set. In the second set, clearly the momentum had shifted. So Vidit struck back. He won set 2. And Hans just resigned because the only way he can stop one of these mates is to play g3, followed by losing his rook. And I guess he just didn't want to play this position. I mean, to be honest, good sport resigning. He could have kept the game going. He is lost, but I think he was just a bit disgusted at himself. And it was 1-1. And the third set was very, very close. It was like 2-1 Vidit. And then Hans just said, all right, I've had enough. I want to leave this little athletic stadium. Like, we're getting out of here. Okay, that's what's happening. So, c4. c5. Players play a completely symmetrical position. Take, take. Bishop b5. Remember, this is now 2-minute chess. 2-minute with 2-second bonus at 1 o'clock in the morning at a random 500 capacity athletic stadium in Dallas, Texas. They flew my boy Vidit from India to Dallas, Texas. I think technically Arlington, but maybe Dallas. I don't know. To play 2-minute chess at 1 o'clock in the morning. Castles for 50,000. They gotta invite me to these things, man. They gotta. You know? Bishop f5. Symmetrical position. Hans putting a little bit of pressure. Knight to b4. Bishop back to e2. Pretty balanced game so far. a3. Knight goes back to c6. Bishop f3. So Hans gets a little bit of pressure on Vidit's isolated pawn. He takes the knight. Very nice move, bishop e5. Collinear, as a Grandmaster Robert Hess would say. Point being that if you take, I could take with the rook, but actually taking with the pawn is even better because I attack the pawn and I attack the knight. So bishop goes here. And in this game, Hans basically, it felt like, was just slowly trying to overwhelm the nervous system of Vidit. Like, he just played slow move. I mean, rook d1 is a slow move. Queen d2. Hans was doing nothing. But by doing nothing, Vidit was sort of getting, you know, annoyed. He's like, I gotta do something. You know, knight to h7. I gotta start taking over the game. Knight g5, to his credit, he's playing very well. But it's not so easy. He plays b4. Hans takes. Now bishop d3, right? Now Hans is like, maybe I'm gonna attack. Now Vidit tries to make something happen. He takes on c3. And when the dust settles, you cannot take on c3 because of the discovered check on h7. But you do get a pass pawn. Get this, right? And I think Vidit was like, the threat of the pass pawn is going to demand a defensive response from Hans. But in that skirmish, look what Hans got. All right, like, look what he got. The last thing Hans Niemann is thinking of here is, I need to play defense against the a-pawn. No, he goes for the attack. He's a fighter. Knight goes back to h7. Now queen g3 is a mate threat. Now black has to play f6. Now white backs up. Another threat. You talk about an initiative. An initiative in chess is a series of moves where every single move creates a threat while improving the position and potentially worsening your opponent's position, right? So, like, this is not an initiative. Because after the move rook a8, you literally have to go backwards and you're stupid. But this is an initiative because now you have queen g3. Now you have bishop f4. And when the king goes to h8, now you have various forms of infiltration against this king. So what do? Well, Vidit, sensing the pressure, plays bishop f5. Here's the problem with that move. Bishop d6. Bishop to f5 opens up the e-file. Hans gives up the bishop because rook e7 is mate. Queen g7, or you have to lose the queen. And now, Vidit goes back, and it's over. Because rook e7 is still a thing. The queen drives into g6. Look at these bishops working together, pointing at that side of the board. Rook ready to come in. You go bishop g8. But now the difference is the bishop has moved to d6. Still can't be taken. It's a phantom bishop. It's just hanging. But there was never a chance to take it because of the threats. Rook e7. And Hans Niemann won this match just like that. Now, actually, in the third set, Hans trailed 2-1 before winning 4 games in a row. So the entire third set was decisive. I guess that's what happens when you play 2-minute chess games at 1 o'clock in the morning. It was 2-1 Vidit. Vidit actually led the match. But Hans was the better player down the stretch. He was more clutch. He lost, actually, a game. It was 5-2. He lost to make it 5-3. But then this was the last game. And he took home $30,000. 30 grand. And here's a nice photo of him with the trophy. You're gonna see the venue as well. I didn't want to spoil this in the beginning of the video. Maybe it's already spoiled. Here he was. This is where they played. They played on a little chess set. They both had noise-canceling headphones. They had these spectators in the back. There was like 20 people there because it was 2 in the morning. 2 in the morning. But earlier in the day, there was a bunch of people. It was full. So that's the match. Vidit Gujarati flies to Texas. Can you fly to Texas directly from Mumbai? Fascinating stuff. I don't even know. Vidit flies into the States, plays a 4+2, 3+2, 2+2 deathmatch against Hans Niemann. I think the money for the event was potentially from Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper plays for the Dallas Cowboys. I think Amari's a chess fan. Also might have played in some chess.com events. Maybe not. I don't quite remember. That could all be wrong, by the way. But the point is, a $50,000 death match was put on between Hans, and it was supposed to be originally Fabiano Caruana, but now it's Vida Gujarati. Hans wins, takes $30,000, and it's not rated. It's not like counting for any circuit or anything. And now in an interview, he has said he's going to play more of these matches. Now, if I could offer a little bit of feedback, unsolicited feedback from the biggest chess content creator in the world, I'm just gonna say, broadcast had to be a little bit better. Marketing had to be a little bit better. Nobody knew this event. Nobody knew this event was happening. And Hans himself even said, like, events like this, you know, they're the future of broadcasting, these deathmatch style things. Yeah, I agree, but the production's got to be there. You know, I mean, I suppose the chess could speak for itself, but no media company's looking at this event going, you know, we're gonna buy the rights to this. So they got to do a better job with the commentary next time. Get me involved, not as a player, but you know, I'll help out. And yeah, I mean, it seems like Hans is going to play several of these things. And going back to the big picture that I said in the beginning of the video, it's ridiculous that the chess world operates on invites. Apparently, according to Hans Niemann, in his own words, he is not being invited to tournaments that he literally won in past years. And you generally invite back winners to your tournaments. He's not getting those invitations. And he may never play at the St. Louis Chess Club ever again. In his own words, that is what he said. Which is nuts and not a good thing. I don't think the chess world should operate on an invitation basis. I think we are long overdue for format changes in the chess world. These head-to-head matches are pretty interesting. I was just involved in one. Granted, the premise of the Clash of Claims was slightly different. But, yeah. Congratulations to Hans. Crazy match. Maybe next time, they just Universal Chess Tour promoted a little bit better. Just a tiny bit. Make sure the game stays on the screen and the camera is on. But other than that, Hans wins. And he's got another match potentially coming up against Anish Giri. Crazy stuff. Crazy times we live in. The Hans Niemann Chess Tour just kicked off with its prequel episode. Stay tuned for more. Get out of here.